Sechus Bava Kamma Daf Pei Dalid begins in the middle of the sugya of ayin tachas ayin, the Gemara's derivation of the halacha, which the Torah says that an eye for an eye, hand for a hand, limb for a limb, that anytime someone injures someone else, that should be done to the mazik. The Gemara has said that doesn't mean you literally injure the person in return. He needs to instead pay for what he did, if he put out someone's eye, has to pay the value of an eye, and so on and so forth. One exception to that being that if someone kills someone, then he has killed himself. The Gemara is looking for sources for that. The Gemara has already brought a number of sources. The Gemara continues bringing many more sources, and then gets more into the details of the halacha of actual injuries. So let's continue the Gemara's list of sources. The Gemara quotes a brisa. Also, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, similar to the last one which we had, which was Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who says that the source for the halacha that ayin tachas ayin is money and not an actual injury is because what happens if the person who caused the injury is himself blind or missing a hand or missing a leg? How would you fulfill the halacha of putting out his eye? He's already blind already. And you can't say that in that situation you wouldn't, because the Torah says you have to have one rule for everybody. Mishpat echad yelachem has to be equal for everybody. So in a case like this, you can't, and therefore you never can. It's obviously never the halacha to cause that person to lose his vision. So Gemara says maybe not. The Gemara rejects this shot because it is possible that as long as it is possible to cause someone to lose that, then you do that to him. And if it's impossible because he doesn't have an eye or doesn't have a hand or doesn't have a leg, then you would pater him. And that's not a violation of Mishpat Echad Yelachem because it's efshar. Then I can prove to you that this is true, because what if somebody's a treifa himself? He himself is about to die shortly. So in halach, he's already considered like he's not alive. Rashi proves that because if someone would testify against him that he's a murderer, and then that person is found to be a zaymim, he wouldn't be killed himself because he's testifying to the death penalty to somebody who already has the halacha of being dead. So this person who's a treifa, if he kills someone, what are you going to do? Kill him instead? And there, the halacha clearly is that you do to him what he wanted to do to what he did to the other one. You kill the murderer. And here you can't, because even if you will kill him, you're not actually killing him because he's considered to already be dead. He's a treifa. So obviously he's potter from that, and that's not a problem because it's efshar. Okay, the Gemara's next raya is a dibei Rabbi Shmo, who says a brisa. The pasuk says, "Kain yinasein bai." The pasuk "Kain yinasein bai," so shall be done to him, has to refer to monetary restitution. The source of that is because it says "Kasher yitain mum ba'adam," and "Kasher yitain mum ba'adam" has to be referring to money, so this is referring to money as well. The Gemara explains the drasha. What he means to say is as follows: is that there's an extra pasuk here. It says "V'ishki yitin ba'misi kasher asa kein ye'asa loi." That is pretty much says it all. Why do you have to add another pasuk that says kein yinasein bai? What does it add? So that addition, that extra, is to teach you that it's money, not an actual injury. Now, the Gemara says, then why do you have to have another one that says kasher yitin mum ba'adam, where it says, since you wanted to say kein yinasein, but you also say kasher yitin mum ba'adam. It's just an extension of the same thing. Next Josh is from Rabbi Chia. He quotes a brisa where it says yad b'yad. The Torah, when it's discussing eid zaymim, says so yad b'yad, hand for hand, means something, it's really something which passes from hand to hand, which is a way of saying money. So here the Torah is telling us that all these things are referring to payment of value, not an actual injury. Someone says, but then what does regel b'regel mean? Something that's handed that's passed from foot to foot? That doesn't make any sense. So the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Chia is learning from an extra pasuk. It says, you should do to the aid zaymim what they plan to do to the other one. Now, if that is literal, what you do to him, what he was supposed to do, so then what is the yad b'yad for? Why do I have to bring me an example? So it must be yad b'yad is the extra, and that's to teach me that it's a money payment, something which goes from hand to hand. So then what's regel b'regel for? So once you said yad b'yad, stylistically you'll continue with regel v'regel, but it's not actually teaching me anything. Next question is from Abaye, who quotes Tanai de Bechizkiah. The Torah says, "Ayin tachas ayin, nefesh tachas nefesh, an eye for an eye, a soul for a soul, not an eye and a soul for an eye." Now, sometimes it'll happen that when you're trying to put out someone's eye, you'll also kill him because of the injury, and therefore you'll end up having an eye and a soul just for one eye. But the Torah said not to do that. So the Gemara says, how do you know that's a kasha? Maybe you're supposed to check him and evaluate his health, whether or not putting out his eye will kill him. And really, you do put out his eye, but if you evaluate his health that he can't survive that, so then you don't. Just like my malchus, we evaluate someone's health that he can't survive the malchus, we don't give him the malchus. Now, if it happens you evaluated wrong, you did your best to figure out that he could survive, and then it turned out that he died anyway, you'd be putter for that, just like by malchus. If you evaluate that he could withstand it, and it turned out that he could, and he dies from it, that's not your fault. Now, the Gemara brings the Joshua of Zvid in the name of Rabbah. The Torah says, Petza tachas potza, which is to teach us that not only do you pay for the nezek, for the injury, you also pay for the pain that you caused. Now, if this, when you say that it's an eye for an eye, it means that you injure the person who attacked in the same injury that he caused to the other one, how is there an additional payment for the pain? He already got the pain when you injured him. So what would the pain be for? Obviously, it's referring to the monetary value of the eye, and on top of that, the monetary value for the payment. Where it says, what's the kasha? Maybe different people have different amounts of tolerance for pain, and the pain causes them more discomfort than it did for the other one. So in a case where the attacker gets less discomfort out of the same injury than the victim, then you have to pay the difference so that it should be equal. Now the Gemara has a similar exchange, where Rav Papa says the name of Rava, the Torah says Rapi Rapa, you have to pay the medical expenses after the injury. So the Gemara asks, if you're causing him the same injury, so then you have medical expenses as well. So why do you need a separate pasuk to tell me to pay the medical expenses? He pays for his own medical expenses that is incurred by the injury that he receives himself. So the Gemara says, no, it's a kasha. Maybe they'll have a situation where somebody heals quicker, and therefore his medical expenses are less. And you have to pay the difference if the attacker's medical expenses were less than the victim's. He has to pay the difference in the value of the medical expenses that he caused to the victim. Rav Ashi has another drasha. It says tachas in ayin and tachas ayin. So we learn a drasha gzeir shava from tachas. Over there, it's the tachas about a shar. About a shar, here it says ayin and tachas ayin. By shar it says shalom mishalem shar tachas shar. That when you kill someone's ox, you need to pay for another ox. There it says clearly that you pay for it. So just like there, it is payment. Here it's payment as well, linked to the word tachas. So Gemara says, why do you make a drasha from the word tachas to the word tachas by shar? Make a drasha from the word tachas to the word tachas by murder of a human, where a human kills another human, and it says nefesh tachas nefesh, and there you indeed kill the murderer. So the Gemara says, no, you don't want to make a drasha from nizikin, from a injury to a murder. You'd rather make a drasha from a injury to an injury. Therefore, we'll link into the injury of the shar rather than to the murder of the human. So Gemara says, no, the opposite should be true. You should preferably link a human injury to a human injury, and therefore human activity, that is, to a human activity, and therefore you'll link the injury to a human to the murder of the human, rather than link the injury of the human to the injury of the shar. The Gemara answers, you're right. We're not learning it to the tachas of the shar. We're learning it to the tachas of a different case of a human. In the case of a man who's ma'anes, a Nara, it says he has to pay her a knas tachas asher ina, and there means since he oppressed her, he has to pay her, and that tachas is clearly payment, and it's human, and it's nezikin, so there is no issue to learn from there. Mar quotes another drasha, a brisa of Rabbi Elazar, where it says ayin tachas ayin, but here he seems to say that it's mamish, you actually pay an eye for an eye. Mar says, really, Rabbi Elazar holds against all these brises and all these tanaim, he holds that you pay an eye for an eye. Says Rabbi, no, that's not what he means. He means you don't evaluate it like an eved. Remember, you don't evaluate like an eved, so then how do you evaluate? Like a free man? A free man has no valuation. So says Gemara, no, it means to say that you evaluate it by the eye of the nizik, of the attacker, not by the eye of the victim. Okay, now the Gemara brings a couple of incidents which will take us into the halachos of how you actually pay the money. So Gemara says a story where there was a donkey who cut off or knocked off the hand of a child. So they brought the case before Rav Papa Bar Shmuel, and he said, go evaluate him for 4 things. So Rava said, why 4 things? There's 5 things. Nezek, Sari, Pushevis, and Vaishas. So the Gemara says, he answered, I meant 4 things in addition to the regular Nezek, you pay another 4 things. I mean to say all 5 things. So Abaye said, but it's an animal. The donkey only pays Nezek, it doesn't pay the 4 things. So he said, okay, no, so go evaluate him for the Nezek, nothing else. So they said, we have to evaluate him like an Eved. You have to see how much he was worth before, how much he's worth after. So they said, okay, go evaluate him like an Eved. So the child said, no, I don't want you to evaluate him. It's insulting, it's embarrassing for him. I don't want you to evaluate him like an Eved. So they said, okay, that's nice for you to say, but the money goes to the child ultimately in the end, and therefore you're causing him a loss. Who says you have the right to do that? And he said, when he grows up, I'll pay the difference for him, if that's what he wants. And now the Gemara brings another case. This time it was an ox that chewed the hand of a child. Came to Rava, and Rava said, go evaluate him like an Eved. Go see how much is worth before, how much is worth after, do an evaluation. Samara asked, but Rava said that anyone who needs an evaluation like an Eved, you don't collect the money in Vavel. And the reason is because since it's not a fixed amount, the Gemara is going to say soon, it's like a knas which you don't collect in Vavel. So the kasha is, how could Rava say evaluate him like an Eved if Rava holds in Bavel you don't evaluate like an Eved? What he meant to say was, find out what the dollar amount is anyway. You don't pay it, but if the guy will come and grab it, he'll get to keep it up to that dollar amount. Now, this is Rava L'Shitase, who says you don't pay like an Eved in Vavel, and then more quotes Rava's Shita here. So Rava says, whenever you have an ox that attacked, that caused an injury to another ox, or a person who caused an injury to an ox, that you do collect in Bavel. However, if a person causes an injury to a person, or an ox causes an injury to a person, meaning any injury caused to a person, you don't collect that in Bavel. What's the difference? So the Gemara assumes the difference is because there are no certified judges of smicha, which is what we would call Elohim in the parsha. Those don't exist in Bavel. You don't have smicha and chutz la'aretz. So the Gemara says, but it says Elohim in Parashat Mishpatim. It's going back on all the different types of injuries, whether it's a shar that's injured or a person that's injured. You need Elohim for all of them. So weiter, what's the difference? So the Gemara says, no, there is a takanas chachamim that you can collect without an Elohim, without a certified judge. You can collect, which we said in Maseches Sanhedrin, we allow collection from a court of hedyotis without mumchim, and that is said specifically by loans in my situations where a person admits that he owes, in order to allow it to be processed without an expert, because otherwise people won't lend anything because they don't think they'll ever be able to collect it again. So just like by haidas and havais, by loans and by admitting situations, we allow collecting without it, so too by an injury that was caused to a shar, we allow it to be collected without a person, without an actual mumcha there. So the Gemara says, and the same thing should be true by an injury to a human. Why don't we allow collection there also without an expert through the same takana? It should also be like haydais v'havais. So the Gemara says, no, the difference is where you need to do an evaluation, you can't. Where you know what the value is, then you can. So the Gemara says again, what's the difference? How do you know that there's an evaluation? How should you know what the evaluation is so easily in the case of an injury to a shark? The Gemara says, what do you mean? By a shark, you just go look what the sale price is in the shark market. So the Gemara says, so for a human also, you could just see what the sale price is in the Eved market. So the Gemara says, another kasha, besides for that, you could just easily see, is if this is the whole reason, you should at least pay kefel, and you should pay the dalad v'hei, because those are fixed amounts. If the whole issue here is the evaluation, the kefel and the dalad v'hei is a fixed amount that doesn't have to be evaluated, so why don't you at least say that you need to pay that? So the Gemara says, okay, I'll tell you a new answer. We only allow for hedyates, which the Gemara uses the phrase for that of Dilan Shlichus Hayu. We act as messengers of the Elikim, of the Dayanim with Smicha. So we only allow hedyates in a situation where it is mamain, where you're paying a restitution for the damages, where it's a knas, where it's a punitive amount that you need to pay. There you need a judge for that. And you don't have that in chutz la'aretz, and therefore you can't collect knas in chutz la'aretz. So that the Gemara asks, but when a person injures a person, he's paying him for the actual loss. That is a restitution. That's mammon. That's not knas. So therefore, you should allow for hadietis to judge that. Why not? So the answer is no, because that's uncommon. A person injuring another person is uncommon. It doesn't happen often. For an uncommon thing, we didn't make a takana of using hadietis. So it says, but the embarrassment and the pagam, which you pay for an einus mafata, a rape and a seduction, that's pretty common, and therefore you should pay for that. Even a chutz la'aretz, you should allow hadietis. So the Gemara says, so yes, you do. That is something which you would pay for in chutz la'aretz, barches and pagam you do. The Gemara quotes that incident happened with Rav Papa, and he collected 400 duds for a voishis that was caused. So the Gemara says, but we don't hold of that Rav Papa halacha. We had a Gemara in Hamaniach where Rav Chizda tried to collect that, where Rav Nachman tried to collect that, and Rav Chizda sent a message to Rav Nachman, Chizda, you're collecting knas in Bavel. We don't collect knas in Bavel. So the Gemara therefore gives a new answer. The only time you can allow hadiyat is if it's both shchiach and there is chisara and kiss. That is a haidal haval. There's a potential loss that people aren't going to want to lend, or a situation like that. It has to be common and be a big loss for the community. But if it's one and not the other, then you won't. It's the only situation in which you'll allow hadiyat. Therefore, when a person injures another person, although there is a loss involved, since it's uncommon, you're not going to do it. Now, in case of voishes, even though it's shchiach, since it's not something which is chisar kiss, it's not something which is a loss, that someone suffered a loss, it's just an injury, and therefore we're not going to allow hadiyat. Okay, the Gemara now switches gears slightly. The Gemara asks, is it true that when a shor attacks a shor, that you collect that in Bavel? We have a statement from Rava that implies otherwise. Rava said a shor that attacks, you don't collect in Bavel. Now, that attacks who? If you're talking about a shor that attacks a person, what does he mean to say that you don't collect that in Bavel? It's not a chiddush. Even a person that attacks a person, you would not collect that in Bavel. So obviously, we're not referring to a shor that attacks a person. We're talking about a shor that attacks a shor. Now, you see a shor that attacks a shor, Rav is saying that you don't collect that in Bavel. So how are you telling me here that Rava holds that a shor that attacks a shor, you do collect in Bavel? So my answer is, the difference between two types of shor that attack a shor, it depends if it's a tam or a muad. If it's a tam, you could. If it's a muad, then you can't. So Mara asks, but Rava said there's no such thing as a tam, as a shor hamud in Bavel. Because since you can't collect tamus, because tamus is knas, palganiska knasa, so they never bring them to court, you never establish that it's a muad, because you need to go to court to have it established 3 times. And there's no 3 times, we won't get to the stage of muad. So what are you telling me you will collect by a muad, and where it's not knas, it's not true, you'll never have a muad in chutz la'aretz. You could have, if you became a muad in Eretz Yisrael, and then you came to Bavel. So Mar says, but you already told me that you don't do things that are uncommon, and that's very uncommon. So says, okay, so there are Rabbanim who paskind that he was a muad, they came to Bavel. So says, that's also uncommon, so that can help. So says, no, so okay, so when we say muad, we don't mean a muad that came from 3 times, we mean a muad like shein v'regel, which is a type of damages which one is muad for right away. The Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah and starts in the Sugya. We've seen the Mishnah giving an example of an injury, discussing an injury which just causes pain. You have to pay for the pain, even though there's no actual injury, there's no actual chabur, there's no wound that's caused. So Gemara asks, is it true that you pay for pain that's caused without an actual injury? The Gemara wants to say that Rava says it's a machlekes, and that this is ben azai. The Gemara calls machlekes between Rabbi and ben azai. So the Brisa says a machlekes is, when the Torah talks about a kviya and a chabura, which one is first? So Gemara says, what do you mean, which one is first? What are they arguing about? So Gemara says as follows. Rebbe holds that when the Torah says kviya, which means a burn, it implies a burn that just causes pain without a wound. A burn could be 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree could be with a wound, without a wound. So Rebbe holds that a burn, stam, would mean without a wound. And therefore the Torah has to write afterwards, chabura, to show that the kviya that we're referring to has a wound. You're only there for chayev for an injury with a wound. If it's an injury that just causes pain without a wound, you wouldn't be chayev for that. Now, Ben Azai holds the other way. He holds that a burn implies 3rd degree, where there is a wound. Therefore, the Torah follows it up with chabura to show that just like kviya to show that the kviya which we had before did not have a chabura, and then we're adding chabura afterwards. Now, according to this, Rabbi wants to say this Mishnah couldn't be Rebbe because Rebbe holds that the word kviya, once it's modified by the word chabura, has to have a chabura and a kviya. And therefore, just a kviya, just a burn alone without a wound, you would not be chayiv for. And therefore, this Mishnah also, you should not be chayiv, but the Mishnah says that you are chayiv even for a kviya without a wound. Now, says Rav Papa, the opposite is logical. First of all, Rebbe should be the one who says this brisa, because this Mishnah, because Rebbe is the one who was Masader Mishnayos. Second of all, if you read it, Rebbe should also be the one who fits in with the way he learns the psukim. So Rebbe says as follows. Rebbe says that kviya is mentioned first, and he holds that kviya means something which includes a wound. Therefore, the Torah writes chabura to reveal that kviya which does not have chabura is also included. And that's pshat in our Mishnah. Rebbe is our Mishnah. And the Torah is revealing that kviya is included even without chabura. Menazeh says chabura is said first. He holds that kviya implies something which does not have a chabura, and therefore the Torah writes chabura to show that it has to be something which actually has a chabura, not just a kviya without a chabura. Now, another pshat Papa wants to say is that really everyone agrees that the word kviya applies with chabura or without a chabura. However, it does say kviya and it does say chabura, and you have actually a setup of a klal uprat. And the question is, would you make a drasha klal uprat here? Now, there is a separation between the klal and prat because they're divided up by the word patza, which is between them. So Machlekes says, do you make a drasha of a klal uprat here? Rebbe says you do not make a drasha as a klal uprat, and therefore you're going to learn this, that it's not limited and implies whether you have a chabura with it or not. The other opinion, Ben Azai, holds you do have a drasha of klal prat, even though they're separated, and therefore you're going to limit that the chabura, the kviya is only a kviya with a chabura, and it's the only situation in which you would be mechayev. However, if it was just the klal, then you would not. According to Rebbe, then the Gemara asks, why do I need the pasuk of chabura, since I'm not limiting it? So the Gemara answers, that's to show that you pay extra money if there's an actual chabura. You pay money for the pain, and you pay extra money for the actual wound.